All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to 3 Best Practices for working with low-level ELLs in person or online. Sheri, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, and thanks for being here. I'm Sheri Lear. I teach beginning level English. I have taught everything from high beginning to literacy level for the past 10 and a half years with Literacy Minnesota.
And my name is Meghan Boyle. I'm the tutor training coordinator with Literacy Minnesota, where I've been since 2014, mostly as a literacy level and beginning English teacher. And I have a master's degree in ESL from Hamlin. And Barb Murphy is not in the session with us today, but she helped to inform it. And you're going to see a video of her later. And she has more than 35 years of experience as an educator, including more than 20 years teaching literacy level and beginning level English. And she has a master's degree in TESOL from St. Cloud State. All right, we're going to start with a quick poll. So once Patsy launches that, which I see she did, you're going to see the poll come up on your screen with 3 questions. You can answer those by clicking on the little radio button and then clicking submit. And this is just to get a sense for who's in the room. And we'll give you a little time to complete that, but eventually we're going to share the results and move on. So if you could do it as soon as you can, that would be great. Looks like we've got about half of you done.
And sometimes it's not super noticeable that you scroll down to see the second question.
Thanks, Patsy. All right, well, let's see, we're at 80%. So I'm going to start kind of looking at these results as they're still coming in. But okay, beginning literacy, about 10% of people, beginning about 30%, both about half. And then we have a couple of people here just out of interest or administrators. And then, okay, most of you are in person, close to 60%. And then about, but let's see, about math, Meghan, math, 32% are both in person and online. So, okay, 40% touching online. Okay. And then as we look at your level of experience, we got 60% with at least 3 years of experience. And let's see, about 35% with a little less experience, so 2 years or less. Okay, thank you so much for participating in that poll. Helpful for us to know that as we get started. Okay, so our objectives for today are to learn or be reminded of 3 best practices at low levels. And since I see so many of you have quite a bit of experience, this might be more of a reminder today and an opportunity to kind of refocus on some things that you might already know. So these are to build relationships, work with volunteers, and to be routine. So I hope that you'll also learn or be reminded of why they are important, and certainly leave with some ideas to incorporate from us and from other participants. We will not do a breakout room, but we will be asking you to answer a few questions in the chat, and we're going to use a Jamboard because I really want this to be a chance for all of us to share ideas. So looking forward to seeing what you put into the Jamboard a little bit later. If you've never used Jamboard, fear not, it is simple, and I will show you how to do it too. And technically it's optional, but hopefully you will contribute. Okay, our first best practice is to build relationships. So I'll talk about what that means, why we should do it, how we should do it, and you'll see some examples as well. So I want to qualify this a little bit before we get into it. And I have a bachelor's degree in social work. And with that education came a lot of talk about boundaries and appropriate boundaries to have with clients. So as I think about building relationships in education, that idea is in the back of my mind. Another idea that's in the back of my mind is that we're in a female-dominated industry, shall we say, here in education. And a lot of times women are asked to do a fair amount of emotional labor in their jobs. And so I want to ease your mind that I have those ideas in the back of my mind as I recommend that you build relationships and talk about how to do it. So most of these strategies can be done in the classroom with standard student-teacher interactions, okay? So, you don't have to go above and beyond your role as a teacher. You don't have to go out for coffee if you don't want to. You don't have to help learners find a job. You don't have to teach them to drive in order to build successful relationships. I want to recommend that whatever you do be comfortable and authentic to you. So nothing more than you want to offer, and authentic to your personality. Not everybody can be Barb Murphy. Okay. I'm not Barb. I'm not going to build relationships in the same way Barb builds relationships, but I certainly can be inspired by how she does it. And then, again, we're not talking about solving all of learners' problems by building relationships, but it might mean listening if they want to talk about their problems. So why should we do this? Well, many low-level students have had little to no prior school experience, so they may be particularly apprehensive when they get into the classroom. And I forgot to mention before I started getting into this slide that we know that building relationships is important at any level, but it is particularly important at beginning levels for this reason, that many of the learners in the low-level classes might have very little to no prior school experiences. So they might be particularly apprehensive. It might be their first US school experience. So we're laying the groundwork for hopefully what will be a long and deep journey into education in the United States. And they may have, little to no prior school experience as a result of war and associated traumatic events in their countries. So, and relationship building is a trauma-informed practice. So these are reasons why I think this is really important at low levels. So, many of us as language teachers may be familiar with Krashen's affective filter hypothesis. That language learning can be stressful. Learners are unsure of themselves. They have lots of stressors outside of class. And this can get in the way of learning. And so we have a role to play in helping students to be in a state of readiness to learn and creating a comfortable environment. So I want to refer to Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, quite a bit in the next few slides. So she says that when students feel safe and comfortable, they learn better. And a trusting, caring student-teacher relationship puts the brain in a safe, relaxed state, priming it for learning. And, this practice honors the collectivist cultures that we often find in our classrooms among our learners. And I want to be careful to not oversimplify or overgeneralize, but in her book, Hammond does acknowledge that American culture is very individualistic. And chances are most of the immigrant students we work with come from more collectivist cultures as compared to American culture. She also says that collectivist cultures emphasize relationships, interdependence with a community, and cooperative learning. So when we intentionally build relationships with learners, we honor the more collectivist worldview that many ELLs have. So how are we going to build these relationships? Just referring again to Hammond as we think about how to build relationships, she says we can use words and actions that say, I care about you. So this can be as simple as a smile, a nod, a greeting, a knowing look, and these are things that we can do in the classroom and in the context of a standard student-teacher relationship. You maybe say, Megan, are you really telling me to smile at my students? Like, of course I smile at them. But I was observed once by a supervisor and she said to me, you know, you didn't really smile through the whole lesson. And so that was a little wake up call for me. I mean, I was nervous because I was being observed, but so just a reminder there. So Hammond also says that we can build relationships with learners through listening with grace. And there's one of 4 aspects of listening with grace, according to her, is to just give your full attention. And we're going to see a great example of this in a short video clip of Barb in just a minute or two. We could also build relationships by building trust and rapport. And there's about 4 or 5 ways in which we can do this. And one of them is through selective vulnerability. And this means to show your vulnerabilities and human imperfections. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I can give you an example from Barb. She learns phrases in her students' languages, and I know she doesn't say them exactly right every single time. So in that way, she's showing a little vulnerability. She's kind of getting in the shoes of learners and showing she's in it with them. And I don't know if Michael Brown is in the session right now, but I noticed that he greeted us in a few languages in the chat in the opening session. So I thought, oh, that's great. Another way in which that we can show our selective vulnerability is to talk about our own struggles in learning a language or learning any skill. If language level allows, you're able to do that. So now another way in which we can build relationships through building trust and rapport is through something Hammond calls familiarity. And there's a little asterisk here because I said that you can do a lot of this relationship building through standard student-teacher interactions. Familiarity might be one in which you have to go a little bit above and beyond. But this just means, you know, getting a sense of that sense of familiarity you get when you see someone often. And so this might be when you encounter learners outside the classroom, in the hallway, or in the community, like in stores or at festivals. And if this is something you're interested in, you've got a great opportunity now with Ramadan to find maybe find an iftar fast breaking meal to join in your community, and you might run into some learners. And with the pandemic and conducting lessons on Zoom, we get this sense of familiarity with learners by seeing each other's homes and maybe seeing each other's children and pets as well. Another way we can build trust and rapport is through similarity of interest, which is so great and easy to do in a beginning English class because it's talking about similar likes, dislikes, and hobbies. So we can connect on these things like food, music, sports, crafts, arts, and dance. And we can show these things easily through pictures as well, handy in the beginning levels. Another way that we can build trust and rapport is through concern. And so connecting over life events like births, illnesses, life transitions, and holidays. And again, you know, if these are kind of centered around a problem, you know, we're not talking about solving these problems for learners, but listening with grace and giving that full attention. And And a final way in which we can build relationships through building trust and rapport is through competence. And this means that we trust those who are skilled. So when we prepare well and make learning clear, exciting, and successful, learners trust us because we are competent and good at what we do. So with these in mind, and I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. So these are the ways in which Hammond says that we can build relationships. And I'm going to ask you to put in the chat which of these might come most easily to you. Which of these might come most easily to you? Words and actions that say, I care about you, listening with grace, selective vulnerability, familiarity. Tell us in the chat which one of these might come most easily to you. Okay. Thank you, Karen and Katie. Heather. Well, thank you. Now they're rolling in. Thank you, everybody. So I think that you know, we can build on our strengths and tap into these and focus and emphasize these that are a little easier and they come to us fairly naturally. All right, so we're gonna see a video of Barb, and it's an example of how she builds relationships with learners. And as we watch this video, please take a look at those ways to build relationships from Hammond on the right side of the screen, and note the ones that you see Barb demonstrate and think about how she demonstrates them. This is a 2-minute video, and it's a level 1 ESL class. CASA scores ranged between 185 and 199. And this was an activity that she did about once a week with learners called Speak, Listen, and Repeat. And again, just think about this question and refer to the list on the right side of the screen as you watch.
What do you think? What do you have?
Strawberry.
Can you give me a sentence?
Yeah.
I have.
Okay. I had strawberry this morning. I with my husband went to the store buy strawberry come home.
And then you
I
came
really
home.
like it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
Very good. Very good. Preme, what did you hear?
She said she had strawberries every morning. She husband go to store. She get your husband in backpack, right?
In a backpack? Preme, her husband in the backpack or the strawberries in the backpack?
In backpack.
Preme, does Sheng go shopping every morning or this morning?
This morning.
This morning. Yes, Sheng?
Yes, this morning
Oh,
I went to the store. Yeah.
good past tense, went. Nice
Thank
job.
you.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so in the chat, tell me, how did you see Barb exemplify some of these ideas from Hammond? Yeah, I think she shows great competence too. That big smile, that body language. Yes, and the joy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Yes. Okay. And so I'm going to go to my next slide. You can continue to share those ideas in the chat. But specifically, these ideas from Hammond that I think I saw in Barb were, you know, that body language that many of you mentioned. So she shows she's listening and she cares with words and actions that say, I care about you. She listens with grace, and that idea from Hammond, she gives her full attention. She corrects, but not every mistake. In that way, she shows competence. So another embodiment of what Hammond talks about. And the familiarity through showing or seeing each other's homes as well. And she gives specific praise. And again, that shows competence. And just in general, she jokes, she keeps it light. She's clearly enjoying herself, as somebody mentioned. So here's our first foray into the Jamboard. All right, so we want to hear from you, want to get your ideas, and this Jamboard link is embedded in the slides. So when you come back to these slides later today or tomorrow, you'll be able to access your colleagues' ideas through the link. So I want you to think about, how do you build relationships in your classroom? And what are other ways to build relationships not mentioned? So as I click on that Jamboard link, are you seeing the Jamboard?
We are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patsy. And so you'll see that this has three frames, and you move through the frames here with the arrow. And really, you only need this button here, and that's the sticky note button. So when you want to add something, you just click on that. I want to answer this question. How do I build relationships? I play games and have fun. When I want to submit that, I can just click outside the box or click save. Once you've done that, I can cancel or click outside, and then you can move this around by dragging. You can resize it by dragging a corner. You can edit and delete with that. So Patsy, would you put that link in the chat now for the Jamboard? And we'll be so excited to see some of your ideas roll in. All the animals joining, the frog, the walrus, the camel. Remembering details, yeah. I'm going to start dragging some of these a little bit. Thank you. Rolling in, looks beautiful. Quarterly potluck, love that. Ask about family, always a great way. Whole group meeting to start. All right, well, you can continue to put these in and move these around to make space. And we're gonna hand it over to Sheri at this point. I'm gonna get back to the slides to talk about working with volunteers.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I'm kind of a volunteer junkie, I guess you could say. I have been teaching online since March of 2020. I used volunteers in my classroom. And when we went online, our organization was very good about saying, take a few weeks, pull yourselves together, figure out how to take your classes online. And the first thing I did was build a relationship. If we want to build a relationship with our students, I think first we need to build a relationship with our volunteers. And so as the pandemic started, we had at least weekly meetings with all my volunteers on Zoom to learn how to use Zoom, to plan together how we're going to try and create this online format. And we were a strong community before, became an even stronger community among ourselves. So by the time we started the online class, we were very much a team there for the students. So I would say having volunteers in any classroom is beneficial, but especially in a low literacy classroom for many of the reasons that Meghan stated before. But why so much in a low literacy classroom? First of all, in a nutshell, when you have volunteers, you can keep groups small. And my online class is somewhere between, on a daily basis, maybe 14 and 18. And I have 3 volunteers every day, so we can go into breakout rooms, keep those groups small and manageable. And why does that help? So the first way it helps is we have this oracy literacy factor, where our students come from a background of oracy, where they gained and demonstrated knowledge through listening and speaking, and now they're moving into a culture of literacy where they're going to acquire and demonstrate knowledge through reading and writing. And small groups can help us bridge that gap from oracy to literacy. We can have small groups, we can focus on conversation, we can build relationships, and then gently guide them over that bridge to literacy. We also have the collectivism, individualism factor, where they are, come from backgrounds where they advance forward as a group, as a society, and they're moving into a culture that's very much about individual achievement. So I would maintain that working in small groups helps create trust, and trust builds confidence, and confidence underlies independence. So again, moving them from this small, very safe group and guiding them gently into activities that are first as a group and then a little more individual, and something that you don't do if it's one teacher and 17 students. The students don't get as much chance to speak. They might lack the confidence to ask questions, and they certainly lack the language to ask questions. A small group enables all of those things. Aside from all the trauma stuff that Meghan talked about, I think working in small groups helps them feel they are in a safe space. So that's working with volunteers for the benefit of the students, but for the benefit of the school or the organization, we also have to remember that engaged volunteers can really benefit our schools and agencies through their support and advocacy. So we need them there. We want to help them build meaningful experiences for themselves, to build relationships with the students. It helps them be better advocates for our programs and really for our cause as well. So next slide, please. Good. So the how, as I said before, is really providing adequate training. With this level, you don't want to just hand a volunteer a page from a text and say, here, just go read this with them. I think with low literacy students, they need education about these students. They need to know that they need to understand the effect of many of these students are learning to read and write for the first time ever, not for the first time in English, but for the first time ever, and what that means for the learning experience and why we do things the way we do and why we move at the pace we do. So I spent a lot of time with my volunteers explaining the why to them. So giving them an activity, telling them, being very transparent, why am I doing this activity? And then the how, which goes into the steps and what I want them to have in their mind as they're working with learners. The second thing is provide them with materials, routines that go deep. So rather than have 12 activities, I have a limited amount of activities that are routines, which I will be explaining as we get into the routine section. And they can use that one material and then have a guideline of steps of all the things they can do with that material. It makes it easier for them. It makes the volunteers more confident. I'll share a story. At the beginning of the pandemic, one of our teachers, one of the coordinators of our learning centers, was leading a class of low literacy students. There were probably 35 students, and she had about 8 volunteers. And at the end of class, they would debrief a little bit. And she said there were 2 types of volunteers. They're the ones, let me back up just for a minute. She would demonstrate an activity, and then she would put everyone into the breakout rooms, these small breakout rooms. And after class, one group of teachers would say, oh, I went through that in like 5 minutes and I wasn't sure what to do for the next 10 minutes. And the other group of volunteers would say, oh, I finished that right away. So I repeated it 2 more times. And then I did this, and they knew what to do with the materials. And sometimes that's the difference between volunteers who are former teachers and volunteers who come from other disciplines. But I think it's important that they have the tools of different things to do with an activity, especially, I would argue, in an online class where they can't run across the room to me and say, what should I do now? What should I do now? I always like to welcome input from my volunteers. My volunteers have given me amazing ideas that I had not thought of. How about if we try this, or what if we try this? But also they bring to the classroom different skills. When I was in the classroom, for some reason, I have several volunteers who come from the arts. They're either painters or whatever. I would use that. I would have them lead art activities. I had one volunteer who was good at yoga. So when we took a little mid-class break, she would lead a yoga activity. They bring such a wealth of skills to our classroom, and I think we're wise to use those. Okay.
Thank you, Sheri. As you know, when I was still teaching for open door learning centers, and I was with, kind of figuring out how are we going to do this online in the peak of the pandemic. And I was just so impressed with Sheri's work with volunteers. So thanks for being here today, Sheri, to share that with everybody. We're going to go back to the Jamboard, and we want to hear from you again. How do you work with volunteers in your classroom? What are other ways to work with volunteers not mentioned? And Patsy, if you would throw that link in the chat again. But everybody, please move to the second frame. That's where we're going to talk or write about volunteers, okay? So make sure you move to the second frame about volunteers.
While you're doing that, I want to just mention one other thing I forgot to mention, which is with my volunteers, both when we were in person and online, we prep before class. So we go through the lesson and I show them what they're going to be doing, again, the why, and we debrief after. And the debrief, especially online, is so crucial because I see someone wrote that on their volunteer informs me of student concerns. This is what happens in our debrief. Oh, I was working with this student and I noticed she seems to have memorized the text, but when I gave her some words isolated, she couldn't read them. These are, of course, important things for me to know.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for all your ideas that you're adding to the Jamboard for everyone to benefit from. Board games, that sounds fun. Yeah, one-on-one work. Yeah, find volunteer strengths and use those. Mhm. Just providing a comforting presence, it looks like, by sitting next to somebody. Excellent. All right, well, as those ideas come to you, you can continue to add them to the Jamboard. And we're going to get into our last best practice, to be routine. So as I was beginning to think about this portion of our session, I had thought, okay, we want to use routines, but then I got to thinking about it, and it's actually, I want to advocate for this idea of being routine, because there's a few ways in which we can be routine. So that's first the classic way, where you might have a calendar routine or a phonics routine or a greetings routine that you do. And so this is that same series of activities that you do at the same time every day of the week, or every day or week. Okay. But then we can also use routine activities that are done often, but with different content. So like a quiz trade or walk talk trade, which I bet many people are familiar with, where learners have a card or some kind of prompt, and they ask each other about that card or prompt, and then they trade and they find somebody else to ask. So using activities like these, but with different content, is another way we can be routine. And finally, having a weekly schedule is another way in which we can be routine. Okay, Katie, I hope I explained quiz trade okay for you. So why should we be routine, in particular with beginning level learners? Well, they'll be more comfortable. And comfort is important because, as we mentioned, many learners at this level may have little or no prior school experience. And so we can make this new learning experience less stressful and more manageable with the use of routines. And in particular for new students coming into the class, there is a lot to take in. And so we can lighten that cognitive load by making the class predictable and setting it up so that learners know what to do from one day to the next. And learners can eventually lead these routines. So beginning level classes can sometimes tend to be more teacher led and teacher centered because of the lower skills of the students. But when we use routines and learners become really familiar with them, they can eventually lead those routines, thereby making the class more student led and student centered. And the routines provide review and redundancy that is so essential at this level. And they allow students to focus on the content and not how to do what they're doing. And for teachers, of course, it's great because it makes it planning much easier for us. And volunteers will appreciate that predictability as well. And of course, they can also lead routines. So how can we be routine, or how can we start to implement some of these routines? I would recommend starting small. So if you come away from the session today with a few ideas for new routines to try, start with adding just one at a time. And make sure learners are confident in it before jumping in to add a new one. I'd also recommend just trying something and you can tweak it. So it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. You might have to shorten it or break it into smaller pieces or extend it. Don't reinvent the wheel. You don't have to come up with anything brand new. You'll get some ideas from the session. You'll get some ideas from the Jamboard. So we'll be going back to the Jamboard one final time for you to add some of your routines. So you can get some ideas there. And then also, this is a big yellow highlight here because after the session tomorrow, next week, you can come back to these slides, click on this link, and you'll see a bunch of videos of literacy level adult classrooms and their some opening routines. Some of them are a calendar routine, a graphing temperature, reviewing a class agenda, and using movement to focus learning and to review body parts. So these are all great sources of routines that you can try in your class. And we're going to demonstrate, or Sheri's going to talk about a couple of her favorite routines now.
Okay, routines. Thank God for routines. They really do help. First of all, I want to say for my first hour of my class, our routine consists of calendar, a conversation question. This is all done in their small groups. And then I have a series of pictures relating to whatever content we're working on. And the pictures are just accompanied by a text box that says, "What do you see?" And with the volunteer, the students talk about what they see, they make those into simple sentences, they practice reading the sentences. So before we get to the text that we'll work on, they've already had a lot of verbal conversations about the topic coming into it. Once we get into our content, this is one of our key routines that we do. It's just the vocab grid. I have between 12 and 16 words in this unit where we were talking about tornado season and tornado safety. I got a little aggressive with a 16-word chart, but this is something that we use throughout the unit. And the first thing I will do with it after they've heard the story a couple times, done a read and repeat, we then go to this vocab grid. And the first thing I'll do is simply, I'm going to say a word and you tell me what number. Very non-threatening. They can listen for the first sound and they can make their best guess. So I'll say, where is the word white? White. And you can use this. So many, and my student might say, oh, teacher number 7, because they will see the W, which is something very common with low-lit students. They'll attend to the one sound. And I'll say, oh yeah, that's good. You saw the W, but this word is wind. Where is the word white? Let's listen to that last sound, white. And you help guide them to the word. So we will do this with all the words in the grid. An added activity, and these are all in the next slide, so you don't have to write these down or anything. The next activity I will do is I will give a number and they will say the word. What is number 4? Black. And this has turned into more of a self-guided routine. So I will say, Uba, what is number 4? She will say black, and then automatically she will say, Faduma, what is number 10? And Faduma will say white, and they'll keep going. And I highlight each word that they say so that they're only choosing the ones that we haven't done. And they have endless fun with that. They're taking some initiative. They like leading the activity. And for a long time, I was stuck on, oh, we did this 2 days. Is this getting boring? I think it's boring. I'm kind of bored. And a good friend, Meghan, Boyle, who's with us, told me, if you're feeling bored, you're at the right level for these students. And I keep that in my mind.
Well, I have to interject and say Maria Abram told me that. So I always remember that.
So it's third person knowledge, but it's wise knowledge. I'm bored, it's okay. They are not bored.
Yeah.
So as we move on from that, I will play a game called I Spy, which is really digging into the anatomy of the words, because I want the students to attend to really see the words, because written language doesn't have a lot of meaning for our students yet, and we want to get to that point. So I'll say, I see 4 words that end in the letter Y. Last letter is Y. Can you tell me those words? They will find those words and tell them to me. I will also follow that up maybe the next day with, I see 4 words that begin with the letter Y. Please write those words down. So they're getting some writing practice. There was a question in the thing that looked interesting. Did anyone see that?
Yeah, Sheri, Lorna's asking, do you have a way of giving the students names to the classmates so they can call on them?
Well, yes, in the beginning, first of all, our groups in my class, we do have like a lower group, a middle group, a higher group. So these students are usually together every day in their small groups. But of course, I'll always start the groups by saying who's in the groups. And then I'll start by saying, okay, Uba, will you ask Fatima? Will you ask her? Will you give her a number? And then one time around they have them usually, because there's only 3 or 4 in a group. But is that what you meant? That was a good question.
Right. And Sheri is online. If people aren't clear on that, she is doing this
I'm
online.
online. Yes. Yeah. I will also follow this with another slide, an activity that I will have some of these words with a couple letters missing, like N-I blank blank T. And I will ask them, do they know what word? Oftentimes they don't. And if they don't, I'll give them the word. The word is night. Which letters are missing? So they're filling in the missing sounds. Oftentimes I'll just leave out the first letter and see if they can get that. And we can build up. That's something we can build on every day. Towards the end of the unit, this might just turn into dictation. Take out a piece of paper and I will give them 4 or 5 of the words to write. And talking about a volunteer giving a good suggestion, as we were debriefing one day, one volunteer who generally works with my higher level students said, oh, they went through this, we did all the activities, they were doing great. So what I did was I took a word and each student had to put that word into a sentence, which is brilliant and a really good activity for coming up with novel sentences. So that's just, I'm sure there's endless ways you can use this, but we pull this up every day and build on activities. And it really does help as we go to the story with their sight word recognition. And also it does, by digging into the anatomy of the word, we also improve their decoding skills.
And I'm going to go the next slide that describes these activities, but then Sheri, you've got a few questions in the chat. Do you want to look at those or do you want me to read them?
Yep, I will do.
Okay.
How many days a week does your class? 4 days. We're Monday through Thursday. How long do you typically work on the same word list for the duration of the unit? And I see the other question, how long are your units? My units are usually 2 weeks. Usually 2 weeks, and I'm working with the same word list. We also do phonics separately, but with the basic vocab grid, we do that every day with the same words. Let's see, were there others?
I think that was it.
Okay, good.
And so again, you'll have access to these slides where Sheri has outlined the steps for these routines.
This is one other routine, and I'll be brief. I know we're getting short here on time.
You're doing great.
I need students, it's important to me that they are able to see the relatedness in words, which oftentimes low literacy students, if you've worked with them, you know this, they might see the word wind and say the word wind, and then they see the word windy, and it's a brand new word. They don't see the word wind in that word. So I'm really big on word study. So I'll take words from the story and then take related words. So Meghan, if you can just highlight that first box, just circle. I'll say, okay, let's read these 3 words. We have night, nighttime, midnight. Now they will likely not be able to read midnight because they don't see the word night in there. So I have them look at this list and I say, tell me what is the same in every word. Once they get it, then I highlight night, 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 so that they can see that that's part of the same thing. Rain, rainbow, rainy, raindrops. This is the activity I will say when I hear this, most students going, oh, so you know that something like they never, oh, I never thought about that. And there's a lot of ahas in this activity. I do a similar one where I'm doing sound patterns like grow, blow, show. I'll give words like that. What is the same in these words? And they pick out that OW having the O sound, until you get words like how, which has a completely different sound, but that's when I tell them English is crazy. So a follow-up to this would be, I added one slide, Megan, that I forgot to talk about. So the next slide.
Okay.
So I might do this where I would highlight that first row. And I would say, I'm going to say one of the words. You tell me if you hear the red word or the black word. And I'll say noisy, the red word or the black word. Of course, these are all things I do online, but as you can see, they can easily be adapted, just printed out and used in the classroom. So this has been a really good activity for aha moments for me, because so often they will not know which is which. And it takes them a while. When I hear that E, there's a Y at the end. So we do this, things like this over and over again. And tons of other routines, but time is short. So yep,
Great.
Those are a couple examples of my routines.
Thank you. Thanks, Sheri. All right, so I want to show a brief video here of beginning English with Maya Sheftel. And just to bring home this point that once learners are familiar with your routines, they can lead them. So just a quick 1 minute
Uba,
here.
I will have you teacher number 1, Nemo, teacher number 2. Okay. If you're ready to please listen, we'll have Uba begin. Go ahead, Uba.
Are you ready? Yes. What is the month?
The month is June.
What is the date?
The date is good. 25th. 25th.
What day is today?
Good. Today is Monday. Good, Uba.
What day?
Okay, just wanted to show you a brief clip just to bring home that point that
Uba, I will have you teacher number 1.
learners can run your routines. So the last example we have for being routine is a weekly schedule or weekly routine that I had for my beginning English class. CASA scores 190 to 210. During the height of the pandemic, when we were totally online, this was an hour and a half, 4 days a week. And, you know, when I was in person, I didn't follow a schedule quite as strictly, but I really felt like once I got online and all of the added mental load for students being online, that I really needed to be very routine and review a lot and have a lot of redundancy. So I came up with this routine, and when you get the slides, you can click on this and you'll find a detailed description of this routine if you'd like to try it with your class or adapt it. But then I'll just briefly go over it. And it is using ReadWorks, which is a K-12 resource. So I would use the first grade readings and I found some nonfiction ones. And I loved ReadWorks because of the built-in comprehension questions that are really easy to see how students do on them. And they had great topics like people like Shirley Chisholm, Little Miss Flint, who is a youth water activist, and Dr. Susan LaFleche, a Native American doctor, and Jane Goodall, and for science, sunrise, sunset, kind of interesting for Muslim students, since sunrise and sunset is so important for them. We did a bunch of articles about apples in the fall, and a story about from calf to camel, and coffee in Ethiopia. What is Juneteenth? Auto rickshaws. That auto rickshaws was a big hit because everybody, pretty much no matter where they came from, had some type of a rickshaw vehicle from their culture. So, it is a K-12 resource, but I found there's some great stuff in there that adults are interested in. We're getting close to the end of our time, so I'm not going to read through the steps, but you can refer to this if you're interested. And finally, we just want to give you a chance to share your ideas about routines in the Jamboard. So you can write a brief description or a step-by-step of a routine you've done. If you work in Google Documents or some other file sharing platform, you could stick a link into the Jamboard of a description of your routine. We'd love to benefit from everybody's ideas after the session. So if Patsy could share that Jamboard link, for those of you who want to, you can share something now. And then I'm just going to bring up our last couple of slides, including our exit ticket. So if you're not going over to the Jamboard to share a routine you have, could you please answer one of these in the chat? Huge excitement over your word grades, Sheri. Awesome.
I think it's important to note, I didn't make it up. There is there is a textbook that uses those, and so I kind of adapted it from there. So I should give it credit if I can remember the name of it. It's like ABC English. Patsy, I'm not sure if you know which one I'm talking about.
I do. I can try to find a link if that would be helpful. That's Jen Christensen's out in
Yes,
Utah.
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great. Let me see what I can find.
I appreciate Becky's comment that, that I think the idea of being routine helped me the most. I always think it'll be boring, but yeah, got to get that routine and redundancy. It can feel boring to us and to our volunteers, but it's so great for students. I want to invite anybody to collaborate with me. If you would like to put together a session together, I would love to do that if you have an idea about low literacy, and we can start chatting and think about a future conference that we might be able to present our ideas at. So contact me if you are interested in that. And we got a minute or two. I know that we need to share the flyer link shortly here for your next session. So that'll be coming through the chat in just a minute.
I'll put that in the chat, and you're getting lots of praise here in the chat box, so be sure to look at that. And I did put the link to ABC English from a colleague in Utah, or I think Utah.
Thank you, Patsy, for
yeah,
finding
you bet.
that.
I will go ahead and stop the recording, and then if people have questions they wanted to ask offline, they can do that.